I'm Vince Russo, former head writer, WWE, WCW, TNA, and I'm about to do an interview here with the Great North Wrestling. And you know if it's from the North, I'm a huge fan.
So you were a wrestling fan growing up. What are some of your favorite memories of wrestling when you were growing up?
Oh man, I guess growing up, there was, cable was just starting, believe it or not. And every Monday night, not every Monday night, one Monday out of every month was the big Madison Square Garden show. And, it was a big, big deal back then. It's when Bruno was the champ. And it was like, really the only big show you got to see because, wrestling that time on television, it was just squash matches. But, one Monday out of every month, Madison Square Garden, that's when you had your pay-per-view type atmosphere. That's when Bruno defended the title. And, I remember as a kid, getting pretty excited about those shows.
Did you ever have any desire to be a wrestler?
Nah, never. The very first time I saw wrestling, I was drawn to the entertainment aspect immediately. Like, I knew what it was, I got it, and, basically later on as I became a writer and a producer, it all stemmed from my very, very first visions of wrestling, and it was always about the entertainment for me.
What's your journalism background?
I've got a degree in journalism from, it's now called Southern Indiana University. When I went there, it was a branch of Indiana State, but I've got a degree in journalism.
And what was the popularity of wrestling like when you were growing up?
Man, it was pretty popular. I know regionally it was pretty popular. Like I said, when that show was on at the Garden once a month, it was sold out. God, everybody in New York, everybody loved Bruno. So, from a regional aspect, and our region was the East Coast, through their eyes, it was big on the East Coast.
And how did you start training with Johnny Rodz?
Yeah, basically, when I knew I wanted to try to get a job in the wrestling business, I wanted to understand every aspect of the wrestling business. I didn't go to Johnny Rodz to train to be a wrestler. I didn't go to Johnny Rodz to train to be a manager. I went to Johnny Rodz to train because I wanted to get educated on the business. And in order to get educated on the business, I knew I needed to be on that other side of it. So that's why I started, going to Johnny Rodz's school.
And for people that don't know who he is, who are some of the people that he's trained and what's his background in wrestling?
Well, he was the unpredictable Johnny Rodz, back in the days of the WWF, and he was, I guess today you would call him a glorified jobber, but, he was always on every single week. He fought everybody who's anybody. His resume is unbelievable. And he wound up, literally in that area in Brooklyn, he wound up training a lot of the ECW guys. He trained the Dudley Boys. A lot of people from ECW went through that camp.
And were any of them training when you were there? Any names that we might remember?
I think, man, that's hard for me to remember. I'm almost positive I trained there when Devon was there. Vito LaGrasso, Big Vito, was there when I trained. I can't really remember anybody else being there when I trained.
And what did you take out of that training? Like what knowledge did you?
Oh my God! I think that really gave me just a great respect for the wrestling business. Seeing the training that these guys went through, like literally every single day, and seeing how hard those guys worked, and knowing I could never do what they do, and just everything that went into becoming a wrestler, I really think that gave me a great respect for wrestlers. And I'm glad I had that type of training, obviously before I started my career, because, like I said, seeing it firsthand, it just gave me a great, great respect of what these guys did.
And how did you start your wrestling radio show?
Basically, I owned a couple of video stores on Long Island, New York, when they were just starting. I mean, there was no Blockbuster. It was pre-Blockbuster. And we ran a couple of WWE promotions that were very, very successful. And somebody had come to one of my promotions that had a wrestling radio show on Long Island. His name was John Arezzi. And, he came to those promotions, and I started talking to John, and I started sponsoring his wrestling show and becoming a part of his wrestling show. But I soon found out that the way he was covering wrestling and the way I wanted to cover wrestling were just two completely different mindsets. And so soon thereafter, I broke off of him and started my own wrestling show.
Did you follow the dirt sheets and know the behind the scenes?
Not at all. I got my education through John Arezzi. I mean, through John Arezzi, I saw that side of the business. I mean, that was the first time like I met a Dave Meltzer and I knew who Wade Keller was. And, that side of it was something that I did not want to get into. I was not interested in it. Again, I was from the entertainment background. So like if I was going to get into the wrestling business, I really wanted to do something on the entertainment side. So I was never interested in that, dirt and gossip and behind the scenes. That wasn't my interest at the time.
What made you apply to get into the WWE?
Well, basically, as I was saying, I had my video stores. Blockbuster moved in. I was going out of business. The writing was on the wall. I already had a son at that point. I knew I needed to find a job. So, being that I grew up enjoying wrestling, and I want to make this clear, I was never, I look at some of these fans today, I was never like that. I was not this fanatical wrestling fan, and I watched every show that was on, and I read the magazines, and I was not that guy. I was a typical casual fan that watched, wrestling once a week, whatever it was. Always loved the entertainment aspect of it. So when I knew I had to find a new form of employment, I thought it might be cool to work in a wrestling business.
Did you already have your set sight on like getting into the magazine aspect of it, or were you just trying to get in any?
Yeah, no, I wanted to write. I had a degree in journalism. I loved writing, and I wanted to write. So to me, at that time, getting a job writing for the WWE magazine would have been really all I wanted. And
I understand that you contacted Linda McMahon directly.
Right.
That was just an idea you had.
Yeah, no, the idea was, I wanted to work for the WWE. I wasn't going to send Vince McMahon a letter. That would have been asinine because he probably got thousands of letters a week. So I thought, you know what? I know Linda works there, and I know Linda works in the business end of it. I had no idea Linda oversaw the magazine. I had no idea, but I wrote to Linda McMahon. I told her who I was. I stated my case. And I got a call from Linda McMahon.
And she basically just offered you the job at the magazine?
No, she offered me a freelance position first. Okay. So I literally started as a freelance writer for the magazine. Like I used to get $150 a story. And I just, wrote for them every month, whatever they wanted me to write.
Okay, so they would give you a topic,
yeah.
Such as talk about this feud and come up with something.
Exactly, yeah.
Who are some of the people that you received positive feedback from about your articles?
It's hard to say because I wasn't working in the office. So like literally I would write my article and just send it in.
Oh, okay.
So like there was really nobody to talk to or get, obviously my editor, liked what I was writing, but there was really nobody to get feedback from because I wasn't actually working in the office.
When did it change and you became an actual full-time writer for the magazine?
Well, soon after, not that long. When I was freelancing for a couple of months, I don't remember exactly how many, but the editor of the magazine was let go, and I applied for that job, and that's when I got the job, and that's when I moved to Connecticut, and that's when I got in the office.
So who were you dealing with when you were editor?
When I was editor, the very, very first publisher that I worked for, well, I guess his role was editor-in-chief. I don't remember. The very, very first guy I worked for was a guy by the name of Tom Emanuel, who was a great guy. He was from the UK, very smart, brilliant guy. He was soon replaced by a finance guy, and his name was Bob Mitchell. And he was a finance guy who tried to be creative. And it's funny, I ran into the same situation at WCW years later. So it was a very, very rocky relationship because he wasn't a creative guy.
And I heard one of the first agents that you kind of became friends with was Bill Watts at that time. Is there any truth to that?
Well, I'm trying to think of the pecking order. I think you got to back that up more. I think the first agent that really took me under his wing and that I learned a lot from was Jack Lanza.
Okay.
I mean, Jack Lanza was one of the first guys I really started, working with when I started writing and definitely producing. Lanza was one of the first guys. He was great, man. He was great. At that time, guys like Lanza, guys like Patterson, guys like that, Tony Greer, Chief J Strongbow was an agent. They'd been there for a while, so they'd been there and done that. So when somebody came along that was newer and younger, they passed on their wisdom and they kind of let you run with the ball. They kind of let you do it because I think at that time they were getting a little older and getting a little tired. So he gave me great direction and really allowed me to be hands-on and just get the full experience.
And what made you start going in the direction of the magazine, kind of building your own angles?
Because I thought the product was horrible at the time. I'll be honest, it's the same way I feel about the product now. The only difference was it was so hard because I felt the product was so bad at the time, and I worked there. So it was so hard to have a love of wrestling and go to work every day and not being a fan of the product. It was so difficult to do. Today I just turn it off. I couldn't do it back then because it was my job. So that's why I just kind of started creating my own angles in the magazine just to entertain myself.
And for people that don't remember, that was the time of Alex the Pug Porteau and Freddie Joe Floyd.
All that stuff, Hopper. Man. The Goon and T.L. Hopper and Who, and it was horrible. It was just a really, really bad time.
Who were the main bookers, I guess, at that time? Because I guess they didn't really have writers then, did they?
Well, I guess at that time it was Pritchard and Patterson, and then Patterson was soon. Then they brought in Watts. Watts was only there for a certain period of time, and then when Watts left and Patterson kind of went back to kind of retired, it was Bruce and Cornette for a while.
So who would have been the people coming up with some of those ridiculous
It would have been them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which one do you think is the worst of all of that series?
Oh God, I gotta say Who. Who was what they were somehow or another trying to take a jab at Hulk.
Right.
That's what it was about. And I'll never forget, man, my rock bottom with how bad it was, when I was just this just absolutely sucks. My office was on the second floor in Titan Towers, and I was right next to Creative Services. And Creative Services would come up with the concept design of what the character would look like. And I always used to go in the woman's office, and I always used to look at her desk and see what she was working on, so I kind of knew what was in the pipeline. And I'll never forget, I went in there one day, and she was working on the character What. So there was going to be a who and a what. And I remember looking at that, like saying, like, are you guys like freaking kidding me? Like, this is horrible. And that kind of led me to reach out to some of my former friends at the WWE that were now at WCW, because I was really into the direction that they were going in, and I wanted to be a part of that.
And for those who don't remember, who I think was Jim Neidhart, I guess, under a mask.
Yeah, Jim Neidhart was who. I don't know who what was.
And the point of who was the announcers would be just saying who.
It was horrible. I mean, bro, not for anything. People could talk about my angles and my ideas. When you look at Mantar and Who and Freddie Joe Floyd and T.L. Hopper, I mean, you could say whatever you want about some of the ideas I came up with, but those were just, I mean, they were just atrocious.
You mentioned that you dislike the product just as much now, other than you're not working for the company now. But what are the ratings like now compared to then? Are they similar?
Back then, bro, I remember when Vince finally went to me, I knew they had dipped below a 2. So they were probably hovering between like a 1.5 and a 2.5, because I remember I remember the exact show, the exact Raw show when I got called in the day after, because I remember watching the show at home and saying, this is like freaking god awful, and they called me the next day, and I believe the rating on that show was a 1.9.
And what are they getting now on average?
I think now the average rating, I think, is about a 2 again. I think that's around where it is.
Similar.
Yeah, very similar.
So what was your feedback from WCW when you checked in with them a little bit? To see?
Well, I finally, I went through Jeff Jarrett, I went through Kevin Nash, and they buzzed Eric Bischoff, and Eric Bischoff did give me a call one night, and I'll never forget it, man. Like, the first minute of the conversation with Eric, I was like, this is the most arrogant, egotistical guy I've ever spoken to in my life. I mean, I knew that immediately about Eric. But you got to understand, at that point in time, where he was and what he had accomplished, he probably had every right to be arrogant and every right to, have a chip on his shoulder, being that, he was slaying the dragon in the WWE. But I'll just never forget, I mean, he was the most arrogant, conceited, obnoxious. I knew that the first 2 minutes I spoke to him. And quite frankly, when I hung up the phone with him, I had a feeling of like, I don't think I want to work for that guy.
So when you were talking to Bill Watts, when you'd see him in the office, I can't see that he would have liked the product very much, judging by his booking back with UWF and Mid-South. What kind of things would he tell you about what he thought about the goon angles and the friendship?
Yeah, no, it was the same thing. It was, God, it's what they've gotten so far away from. Bill Watts, first of all, Bill Watts was a man's man. Bill Watts was very character driven. He was very storyline driven, but the storylines and the characters were like believable. Like they were wrestlers. Like it was believable. It wasn't cartoonish. It wasn't stupid. It wasn't silly. It was very serious. That's what's missing from wrestling today. The seriousness of wrestling. There's no heat anymore. It's gone. It's silly. It's stupid. It's freaking ridiculous. It's okay to have a segment of the show like that. Like you need your comic relief, and I get, like, the wrestling show needs to have a little bit of everything. But here we are in 2016, and it's so silly and stupid and non-believable. And again, you have shows today like Game of Thrones and The Walking Dead. Television has gone to such a unbelievable level, and through Vince McMahon, wrestling has gone backwards. And that's why today you just have a very small core audience watching wrestling, because the casual fans think it's stupid.
So before you actually joined the creative team, did you have any experience sitting in on creative meetings or anything like that?
Oh yeah, no, bro. People don't understand. I went through an education at WWE before I ever started watching Raw. I mean, the first thing I would do is I would start writing the promos, the regional promos for the guys. And, like, we're coming to the Nassau Coliseum, we're coming to the Pepsi Center, we're coming to Madison Square Garden. I wrote for every guy, and I had to write a different promo for every arena. So, literally, I would write about 10 to 12 to 15 local promos for each wrestler. Then when we got to the arena, I would produce those local promos with the wrestlers. That was the first thing I did. From there, Vince McMahon would start giving me specific characters. Vince, I'm developing this character. I want you to write for this character. Like Goldust was the very first one. Vince kind of handed off Goldust, and he had an idea for Goldust, but it wasn't a fine-tuned idea. So then I would really start working for specific characters. I mean, during Shawn Michaels' run as champion, you mentioned you just interviewed Vader. I mean, I can remember writing Shawn's promos against Vader. I literally scripted every Shawn Michaels promo when he was the champion. So, I had this education of writing and producing, first regional promos, then individual talents, then going out on shoots when they did some, great vignettes with Taker in the cemetery and stuff like that. So I had done all that, sat in with Pritchard and Cornette on creative, sat in with Pritchard, Patterson, and Bill Watts on creative. I had gone through all that ever before Vince, basically gave me the reins for Monday Night Raw.
So you mentioned you worked with the Goldust character. Were you responsible for any of those vignettes that they made for him?
Oh, all of them, every single one of them. I mean, I wrote every single one of them. Literally gave Dustin the verbiage, and he knocked it out of the park.
Did you come up with the idea of him coming out with a wig on and then taking the wig off?
No, a lot of that stuff he came on his own. Like as far as the physical and the and stuff like that, and wig on and wig off. A lot of that was Dustin. Dustin really became that character. I would write it, but he would go out there and he would perform and be that character. So all of that stuff, he developed all that on his own.
What did some of the longtime agents think of that character? Because it was highly controversial for that time.
Oh, God, bro, a lot of the agents early on, I mean, I got to be honest with you, they thought I was nuts. Like, I can remember, like, Patterson and Briscoe, like, looking at me and, like, almost just laughing at me. Because, I mean, it was such a change in the traditional wrestling that they were doing. But I got to tell you, back then, they weren't vocal about it. They would look at me and laugh, and I think in their minds, they would think this kid's going to fall flat on his face. I think that's what they would think, but they would never say it. But then all of a sudden, as it started catching on and as the ratings started going up and as people started making more money, that's when everybody else started really getting on the same page.
And you brought up that you worked on the Shawn Michaels versus Vader feud. Vader didn't like Jim Cornette, but he didn't go into details on why that dynamic didn't work with him and Jim Cornette as his manager. Do you know what the problem was there?
No, because I wasn't that heavily involved in the writing at that point. You know, like I said, I was writing for certain individuals, but I wasn't writing the show, so I really don't know what that heat would be.
And you were still doing the magazine during all this?
Bro, I did the magazine to my last day. I never left the magazine.
So you mentioned that there was a kind of a black moment with WWE with that horrible Raw. I think you mentioned that was the one where they were showing clips from one of their overseas tours. With
There were two shows going on at the same time. One was here, one was over in England, and I remember watching it, and I'm like, oh, this is god awful. And I got into the office early the next day, before 9 o'clock. I got a call from Vince's secretary. Her name was Beth, and she says, Vince wants to see you in his office immediately. It wasn't even 9 o'clock yet.
So what happened in that meeting?
Well, I'll be honest with you. The Raw was so bad. And you had to be an idiot to not know it's bad. But I'll be honest with you. Like, I sit here today, and I say, how can Vince McMahon not look at his show and not know it's horrible? And honestly, his age has a lot to do with it. The fact that he's over 70 now, I actually believe that what he produces he thinks is good. But back then, he knew it was the shits. I mean, he knew it. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, they've hit rock bottom. The Friday before that, I had a meeting with him and Linda where I basically said to them, if you guys think all I'm capable of doing is writing the magazine, I need you to tell me that. Because if their answer was, yeah, that's all we think we were going to do, I was really going to try to pursue WCW, even though I didn't want to work for Eric. So that meeting did not go very well, and as a matter of fact, during that meeting, at one point, Vince got very hot at me. So now I had a meeting on Friday where he got hot at me. They had a horrible show on Monday. So I swear to you, I think I'm being called up to that office to be fired. So when I walk into that office, all of his minions were there. So when I saw the minions sitting around the table, I said, okay, I had already accepted it. Okay, he's got to make an example out of somebody. It's the mighty and powerful Vince McMahon. He's going to make an example out of me. He's going to fire me in front of all these people. And, you know, I literally was already thinking of, okay, what am I going to do next, because I'm going to need a job. That's really what I thought when I walked into that office.
And that's when he offered you the position of head writer?
That's when he basically had the Raw magazine in his hand, threw it on the table, and said, this is what our show needs to be. And I was probably the most shocked of anybody else in that room.
What was the reaction of the older agents and the guys, like, I guess, the Jim Cornette?
Bro, they hated me. They hated me. They despised me because, I wasn't a former wrestler. I hadn't been in the wrestling for 20 years. I could tell you the only one in that room who was excited about me in that role that I could see, the only one that was excited about it was Shane McMahon. Shane was in there, and I could tell Shane was excited. The old guard, there's no doubt in my mind that at that point in time, they just wanted me to fall flat on my face and fail. Because, in their minds, I had not earned that spot. However, the reality of it is, they dropped the ball. They were in that spot. They were doing that job, and they were delivering Vince McMahon a horrible, horrible show, and he knew he needed to do something about it.
So did you start right away?
Immediately. Bro, there was never a plan. There was never a master plan. We never sat down and said, okay, the Attitude Era is going to start now, and this is the way it's going to be. We never did that. What I tried to do was real simple, bro. They're doing the same thing now. They're putting on an unbelievable 1970s wrestling product. Bro, anybody who watched that first segment this past Monday with the shark cage and
I can't watch it, so I'm not watching.
it was a joke, bro. It was a joke. It was embarrassing. I was embarrassed for Mick Foley. It was that bad. They were doing the same thing back then. And I went in there, and the whole thing was, we are going to bring this up to speed. We are going to mirror what's happening here in the world in 1996 and 1997. We are going to give the wrestling business a realistic approach. We're going to have real people with real feelings and real emotions, and not cartoon characters who look like absolute idiots. And that's what we did. I mean, basically, that's what we did. We just started really writing a more serious show.
What are the responsibilities of a head writer, if you're the head writer for WWE?
Well, I don't know what it is today.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea what it is today. Back then, I was responsible for the show.
Okay.
I mean, literally...
All of the shows, or just Raw?
Raw and SmackDown.
Okay, and the
Raw and
pay-per-views.
SmackDown. Literally, the way it worked was, I would, I think a Raw show was like 11 segments. Okay, so I had to come up with the 11 segments of the show. I did that on my own. Okay, I sat by this is before Ed Ferrara. I sat by myself. I came up with these 11 segments. The next thing was to pitch Vince those 11 segments and lay out the show to Vince. This character's doing this, blah, 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 blah. Once I got the green light from Vince, now I went back and I wrote the show. Segmented the show, commercial breaks. I mean, A to Z, I wrote the entire show. Now when the entire show was done, I brought that entire show to Vince. I sat down with him again, and he tweaked the show. That was it. That was the process. Before Ed Ferrara came on, it was Vince and I. And then basically when Ed came aboard, me and Ed worked on the stuff together, presented it to Vince. Me and Ed went back and wrote the show, brought the final show to Vince, and he tweaked it. So at the end of the day, we were responsible for the show on that paper.
And what's it like working directly with Vince?
Bro, it's like, here's what it is. You can't work for Vince unless you're willing to give him your entire life. Vince and the WWE has to be number one. You're on his beck and call. Your family is second. Your social life is second. Your friends is second. The WWE has to be the primary force in your life. And quite frankly, that was okay for me for a couple of years. But after a certain amount of time, I started realizing there are more important things than a wrestling show. And that's when I just started looking at things a little differently.
What was the wrestlers' reaction to going towards the edgier style?
Bro, for the majority of them, a lot of people were reluctant at first because they had never done anything like this before. But like I said, as the ratings went up, they made more money. And at the end of the day, that's all the wrestler cares about. What is my paycheck going to be this month? And the more and more and more money they made, the more and more and more they are on board with the product.
Were you involved in changing The Rock from Rocky Maivia to the Rock character?
There are stories out there, and I don't know and I don't care, but I will tell you this as a fact. I had the idea of The Rock in my mind for about, God, bro, it was probably a couple of months. And the whole reason why I didn't go to him with it was because I was a huge fan of Don The Rock Morocco. And I did not want to be disrespectful to Don Morocco, like, in any way. But, like, this Rock thing, it stayed with me. And I'm like, I've got to pitch it. So I remember one night we were at a Monday Night Raw. We were rehearsing during the day, and it was just me and him in the back. And I said to him, I said, Rock, I want you to try something tonight. And he goes, what? I said, I want you to start referring to yourself as The Rock. And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, start referring to yourself in the third person. The Rock says, The Rock thinks, The Rock did this, The Rock did this. And he kind of looked at me, and I remember him saying to me, are you sure? And I'm like, yeah, bro, just try that. Just refer to yourself in the third person. And it was one of those things where he went out that night and he did it. And like I watched, and those days nobody knew who I was, so I could go out in the arena. So I watched, and that first night I was like, that's it. Like, I mean, I knew immediately a star was made and a star was born. The way he delivered it and the way he got it over, I just knew it was going to explode.
Was he pretty easy to work with overall?
Very easy. Very, 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 very easy. Because I'll tell you why. He was smarter than everybody else. He was smarter than everybody else. And he would never look at a script and come back with a knee-jerk reaction. He would always look at a script, and if there was something he didn't like, he would process, okay, like, why did Vince write this? What was Vince thinking about? So then he would come to me, and it was always about presentation. And he would say, Vince, I love your script. This, that, and the other thing. Put me over, put the script over, but then he would put his spin on it. He said, but how about if we tried it this way? And I would, 99.99% of the time say, Rock, that's great. Absolutely unbelievable. Nobody knows a character better than the character. So, like, I can write a script, but you got to remember, I'm writing a script for 50 different characters. Now when I hand it to that character, now they're really looking at every I and every T, and now they're really making it them. So 9 times out of 10, when they come back to me and say, you know what, I don't think I'd say this, but I'd say this, beautiful. And that's how it was working with him. I don't remember ever having a disagreement. I don't remember ever having a fight. I know we never had an argument, but he was a piece of cake to work with.
What was Sonny like to work with?
Sonny was okay to work with, but there was a big Sonny Sable rivalry. A big rivalry. There were a lot of words. Yeah. I mean, words were exchanged. I mean, I never saw anything physical. Words were exchanged all the time. But like I said, it almost became the norm. But I never saw anything that I thought was gonna go to blows or anything like that. And in my opinion, because she'll probably tell you differently, I thought it really affected Sonny. I felt Sonny was very jealous of Sable. Sable, rose through the ranks very, very, very quickly. And I think there was some jealousy there, and I think the jealousy at times made it difficult for me to work with Sonny.
And Sable was with Mark Merrow at the time?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Was she still with Mark Merrow when she started going out with Brock Lesnar, do you know?
I think she was, yeah.
And what was Shawn Michaels like to work with? Because he was going through his personal issues, and he's admitted to now.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And that's why, like, sometimes I had a love-hate relationship with Shawn, because I wrote a lot of Shawn stuff, but like he will tell you, back then you never really knew what Shawn was going to show up, and there were times where he did show up under the influence of something. And, it made those times very, very, very difficult. I always had a soft spot for Shawn, because I will sit here and I will tell you today, and I've said this publicly, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, he was the all-around greatest professional wrestler I ever worked with. I mean, all around. I mean, I'm talking about every single tool. There was nobody better than Shawn. I mean, across the board. And that's why, I always had such a special place for him in my heart. I always worked closely with him. But there were some difficult times, because you never knew what guy was going to show up.
Were you one of the people that were helping get that D-Generation X gimmick going?
Definitely, yeah.
And what was Triple H and Chyna like when they were a couple I guess back around the time where you first took over?
Well, China, Triple H always spoke for China. You know, China, you never went to China with anything. You always had to go through Triple H. That's the way it always was. And it was just kind of a weird dynamic. You know, they were dating. They were very serious at the time. They were on the road together. They were always together. But the tough part for me was I could never really deal with China one-on-one because she was attached to Hunter. I kind of always had to go through Hunter with what we wanted China to do. And that just made it a little difficult at times.
Were you even around when he was in the process of switching from China to Stephanie?
No, thank God I wasn't. I'm glad I wasn't around for that. When I left, they were still very much together.
Okay. What are your thoughts on what happened to China after that? Because I guess that pretty much just seemed to destroy her.
It did. I mean, the wrestling business killed China. I mean, it's that simple. Listen, a lot of us, you know, we all handle things differently. She could not handle losing her fiance, losing her job, losing her name. She was hit with so much at once, and it was during that time that she formed an addiction to pills and an alcohol to get through those tough moments, and obviously she never overcame those demons. And man, it's just it breaks my heart to think of it to this day because she was such a beautiful human being with a beautiful heart, and the wrestling business was so cold and callous to her, and she just deserved so much better.
Would you have imagined in those days that Triple H would have the power that he has now?
I never would. You got to remember, I was there when those guys took the curtain call at Madison Square Garden. And I was there when, you know, at that time, you know, Shawn Michaels was the champ, so they weren't going to do nothing to him. And Scott and Kevin were going to WCW. So the only one left to punish was Triple H. And I mean, they dogged him, and they punished him, and they jobbed him out, and Jim Cornette and Bruce Pritchard wanted him fired. And, you know, I used to have talks with him, like me, and I'd say, you know, Hunter, just get through this. You know, you're going to pay for what they did. You got to get through it. You got to keep your mouth shut. Just get through it and endure it. I would have never thought at that time he'd be in the spot he's in today.
Whose idea was it for D-Generation X to come up with that invasion angle where they actually came to a WCW show?
That was me and Ed.
What was your thinking behind that?
You know, again, bro, we were in a ratings war. We had no idea what was going to happen. We didn't know if WCW was going to open the door. We didn't know if Eric Bischoff was going to come. We had no idea what was going to happen. But what we cared about was we were writing must-see TV. You had to tune in to see what was going to happen. And when the writers had no idea what was going to happen, obviously the people at home had no idea of what was going to happen. That's when wrestling was at its best. And that was the whole idea, man. We're going to tape this. We don't know what's going to happen. It's unpredictable. Let's go. You got to understand, too, like those guys... Those guys, they were friends, like, Scott and they were friends. So, like, they weren't really that worried about it. All the boys on both sides really thought it was funny. I mean, I don't think there were any of the boys at WCW that were pissed off.
Right.
They're the boys being the boys. So I thought more than anything it entertained them.
So they weren't worried that Ming was going to be on the other side of the gate if they opened up?
No, not at all. Not at all.
And what was it like working with The Undertaker?
Man, he was, there's a reason why he's the locker room leader. I mean, he's the guy that led by example. And I can't tell you how many nights I would see him have the match of the night, and as soon as the match was over, laid out in the back in excruciating pain. I mean, he had bad back issues. and you would watch the match, and like you would have no idea. And then when he went in the back, and you saw, you saw him out of character and laying on the floor, and the chiropractor, and working on him. I used to just sit there and watch him, and I was like, God, man, I had all the respect in the world for him.
Did you come up with the Undertaker versus Kane angle with Kane?
Well, yeah. Well, I'll be honest with you. Bruce Pritchard, prior to me writing, he had this idea of this Kane character. So that Kane character was Bruce Pritchard's from the start. But then when we started writing it, Bruce wasn't a part of the creative. So, first it was Vince and I, writing the Kane Undertaker stuff. Then Ed joined it.
Are you surprised that the Kane characters had so much longevity?
I'm not surprised, but I just think they bastardized it, through the process. I mean, I've seen a lot formations of Kane that I wouldn't have done. I mean, I to this day, I think Kane would still, have the aura that the Undertaker still has. But I think they just put him through a series of changes that I don't think helped him.
What was your involvement in changing Stone Cold Steve Austin from the ringmaster to his developing into the Stone Cold character?
Well, bro, I got to be honest with you. I mean, you gotta give credit where credit is due, and that was all Steve. And that's the thing that just it just pisses me off, because people don't have a clue and they weren't there. And I was a fan of Stunning Steve Austin at WCW.
Right.
I
still prefer that character, actually, believe it or not.
I never saw Austin's work at ECW. I never saw it, but I love Stunning Steve Austin. I knew the guy could talk. And I'll never forget when he was hired, Vince would call me in the office, and he'd give me like a blueprint of, okay, like these are who these characters are, and I would have to develop the characters.
Right.
And I remember Vince looked me in the eye and he said to me, Steve Austin is to never open his mouth. Ted DiBiase is to cut all his promos. And I remember looking at him, and when he said that, I knew Vince didn't have a clue who Stunning Steve Austin was. The fact that you don't want this guy to talk, like, bro, like, seriously? So I now had to go to Steve, and I said, Steve, listen, bro, this is the mandate Vince has given me. I said, I don't agree with it. I says, it's what he wants. So basically, Steve said to me, Vince, you got to find a way for me to talk. You got to give me an opportunity. You got to give me a chance. So I remember I was writing a show. I don't remember if it was with Ed or not, but there was an opportunity to put Austin as the ringmaster on headsets during a match. And we put Austin on color during the match and let Austin talk, and right there, Austin 316 was born. Stone Cold. Bro, this guy took literally 3 minutes on color to become a millionaire. I mean, it was 3 minutes. And he took those 3 minutes and he owned those 3 minutes. It was all him, and Stone Cold Steve Austin was born from there.
Was he pretty easy to work with?
He was a little difficult, bro, and I'll tell you why. You got to understand, Steve came through the ranks, man, and he was always, really a mid-carder at best. Once he became Stone Cold Steve Austin, he skyrocketed like that. And I know there was always a part of Steve that kind of, in the back of his mind, when he finally achieved this greatness, and in the back of his mind, I knew he thought, I could lose this just as quickly as I got it. So when we would write for him, he would really look at everything through a fine-tooth comb. I mean, really analyze it and rip it apart and put it back together. And I mean, at the end of the day, like, you can find a problem wrong with any script if you want. You can find a problem wrong with anything. And I think at times, because of his, I think he was a little paranoid of going backwards. And I don't blame him, because he was so hot at the time. If the writing and the creative didn't match how hot his character was, he would have taken steps backwards. So I think sometimes he might have overanalyzed things to a fault, but I think over time, when we did some of the great stuff we did with him, I think, we really, really earned his trust, and as time went on, it just became easier and easier.
Was the ECW invasion angle your idea?
No, that was Pritchard, and he was working with Paulie. That was really before I started writing on a full-time basis.
What did you think of ECW in that era with Paul Heyman running?
Well, a lot of people, want to say that, and a lot of people like to say this, that I was influenced by ECW. No, I was influenced by the NWO. There's no doubt about that. I had seen very few ECW shows. And my feeling when I watched these ECW shows, where I would watch these shows and I was like, I'm literally going to see somebody break their neck on this show. I'm literally going to see somebody break their back. Like, I couldn't understand how somebody like Paulie was able to convince these guys to do the things that they were doing. Because a lot of the stuff they were doing was out of control. And I mean, and I would watch, and I would fear for these guys, thinking somebody's going to seriously get hurt. And that was my feeling of ECW, that these guys were wacko, and these guys were crazy to do the things that they were doing, risking serious injury. These guys are nuts. So I was never influenced by ECW. I respected it. I never really understood it. I don't think a wrestler has to really put themselves through all that. I think it cuts short their careers. I think it should be more controlled. But more of my influence really came from what the NWO was doing.
Did you get the chance to work with Brian Pillman much?
Oh, yeah, man. Absolutely.
What did you think of him?
Unbelievable, man. Bro, so far ahead of his time, like it wasn't even funny. So far ahead of his time, but when I worked with him, I could tell he was in physical pain. I could tell the guy was in pain, but light years ahead of his time.
And what was it like working with Mick Foley?
Oh God, bro, Mick was just another one that just great to work with. I mean, just great to work with, and that's why, bro, when I watched that promo last Monday night, and I'm going back to the things that we wrote for Mick, the things that we wrote with Mick, the things that I produced Mick doing. And then I saw this, and I'm like, God, bro, I felt so bad for him. But he was, he's a great man. He's a great human being, man, and he's just a great guy.
What was your reaction to that Hell in the Cell match? Because I'm sure you were writing on that.
I was, bro. I'll never forget, man. I love telling this story all the time, but when they wheeled him in the back, I was right there, and I'm looking at him on the gurney, and his freaking teeth were through his lip. And I was really worried about him physically. I knew his kids were there. And I'll never forget, I just said to him, I said, Mick, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? And I'll never forget, he looked up at me after that match and everything that he went through and what he put his body through. And he looked up at me and he goes, Vince, was it better than Shawn's match? And like at that time, I realized just how important his performance meant to him, that he was literally willing to cripple himself in order to give the best performance. I can't comprehend that. I mean, I can't comprehend that. And I just remember looking at him and saying, bro, are you freaking nuts? You could have killed yourself out there, and he was worried about topping Shawn's match. But that's everything you need to know about Mick Foley.
Terry Funk was used a bit with Mick Foley when you were working there. What was it like working with Terry Funk?
Yeah, same thing, man. The more of an old-timer you are, the easier I think you ought to work with. because these guys had done everything. They'd been through everything. These guys understood it was a business. They understood they were doing it for a paycheck. So I think the older you got and the more of a veteran you were, the easier you would have worked with in general.
Obviously, Bret Hart seemed like he was becoming difficult to work with at certain points, but what are your views on Bret Hart?
Bro, I always say, man, it was very important for Bret to be the Canadian hero. And I say this all the time. He was a Canadian hero. Like, I truly believe Bret Hart was a Canadian hero. And there's something about Bret, bro. Maybe it's the way he carried himself. I think out of anybody I ever worked with, I really believe I respected Bret more than anybody. I just had this respect for Bret Hart. I mean, let's face it, the name, the tradition. But it was the way he carried himself. And you would only see, like, shades of Bret not being Bret here or there when Shawn was really pissing him off. Like, I mean, that stuff was real. And then you would see, like, a different side of Bret that, like, you didn't want to see. But, 95% of the time, I mean, he literally carried himself like a Canadian hero. I bought into it. I believed it. I still consider Bret a Canadian hero, but I had so much respect for that guy. It was unbelievable.
Was it your idea to have the Canada versus USA angle that was really getting over towards the end of his run?
Yeah, that was very, very early on in my booking, but yeah, I was involved in that too. And there was a lot of heat in that, bro, a lot of heat.
Oh yeah, I actually was at a few of those events, and it was pretty amazing how much the crowd was into it.
Yeah.
And what are your thoughts on the whole Survivor Series incident?
Oh, yeah, I mean, bro, that's such a long story. I mean, I talk about it in detail in my book. And again, you hear stories now, it was this one's idea, it was this one's idea, it was everybody's idea. It's such a long story, but what happened, I pitched to Vince, and the only reason I pitched it to Vince was there were phone conversations between Vince and Bret, and I was on the line because Vince wanted a third party. So Vince pitched Bret every scenario possible, and Bret poo-pooed everything. Everything. So now we were getting late into the night, and we were still trying to come up with what are we going to do, what are we going to do, what are we going to do. And I remember out of pure frustration and just wanting to go home, I said, it had to be 9 o'clock. I said, screw it, Vince. I said, have freaking Shawn put him in his sharpshooter and have the referee ring the bell. I said, screw it. Like, it was just out of pure frustration, bro. Like, enough with this. Like, we need to do something. So after that, that was during the week. I didn't have any contact with Vince. I didn't have any contact with Vince the day of the Survivor Series. I had no idea what the finish was going to be. And I sat there in front of the TV, and I remember I was sitting next to Taker, and it was exactly what I had pitched Vince. And I remember sitting there saying, holy shit, like, I can't believe, like, that's what he done. At the end of the day, bro, I wished it had never happened. I'm not proud of that. People say I take credit for the idea. I don't take credit for the idea. I wished it would have never happened. It was a horrible day. Maybe I can't say my worst day in wrestling, because that obviously would have been when Owen passed away. But it was just a horrible day. It affected people's lives. I wished it would have never happened. And at the end of the day, bro, and I still feel this way, and I said this to Bret, Vince was trying to protect his company. Vince did what he felt he had to do to protect his company. It's not that he didn't trust Bret. He didn't trust Eric Bischoff, and he didn't trust WCW. And at the end of the day, Vince did what he felt he had to do to protect his company. And I support him. I had the conversation with Bret. And, I knew he wasn't going to agree with that. But from where I sat, that's how I felt about it.
And what did Bret make in WCW? Do you actually know what the numbers were that he went on to make?
Oh, I have no idea.
But it was several million a year.
Yeah, I'm sure, but I have no idea.
And out of that, probably one of the greatest angles of all time, Austin versus McMahon was born. What were your thoughts on McMahon actually going in that direction? Was that part of your plan?
There was a lot of talk, before I started writing, like when I was just sitting in on the meetings. There was a lot of talk about Vince becoming a character on TV. They were talking about it. And then, we had the perfect opportunity when, after the Survivor Series, when Bret punched Vince. And I'll never forget, Vince had a black eye. And we're in the production meeting the next day. And Vince is sitting there with a black eye, and I remember all the agents and all the old school guys, everybody in that room wanted to just sweep the incident under the rug and ignore it like it never happened. And I listened to everybody, and I'm listening, and I finally just said, I said, are you guys like out of your freaking mind? Vince McMahon is walking around with a black eye. You have perhaps the biggest story that'll ever happen in the wrestling business. This is it. We have it right here. And I said, you want to sweep this under the rug? I said, no, we need to take advantage of this. And I could see Vince thinking, listening, thinking. And that was the perfect opportunity for the, I didn't screw Bret Hart. Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart. And that was really the beginning of the heel Vince character.
You've said in other interviews that the whole Brawl for All tournament was a concept designed by you to prove that JBL really isn't that tough.
Pretty much, yeah, because we were back there one day, and I think it was me, JBL, I think it was Kevin Kelly, and he was mouthing off that if this were real, I would lay everybody out. And I remember listening to him, and listen, JBL was not one of my favorite guys. He was one of these boisterous, cocky, conceited Texas badasses. So as soon as he said that, I'm like, okay, let's see what would happen. So I did go to the next creative meeting and pitch that to Vince, and that's how the Brawl for All was born.
Was that just because UFC was just developing at the time?
It really had nothing to do with UFC, bro. It really was to keep trying to do different things. And bro, some things worked and some things didn't, but it was all in, you never knew what you were going to get when you put on our show. It really, that wasn't inspired by UFC at all. It was just, let's try something different.
And what are your thoughts of Joey Styles ultimately, I guess, getting the better of JBL?
And when I read that, I didn't feel bad for JBL, let me say that.
I guess there was a lot of injuries out of that Brawl for All in the end, so
yeah.
That's why there was never a second one.
Yeah, but bro, I got to be honest with you, there were a lot of injuries, but a lot of guys made a lot of money that they wouldn't have made. Some guys weren't being booked, and if they wanted to be a part of this Brawl for All, bro, they were getting paid a nice amount of money. If they went to the next round, they got even more. So the guys, some guys that weren't being used as much made some good money. But yeah, hindsight being 2020, with the chance of those guys getting hurt, I don't know if I would do something like that again.
Was it your idea to bring in Butterbean to fight Bart Gunn?
Yeah.
And I guess, in hindsight, would you have tried to possibly work that match? Or?
No, bro. Bart Gunn will tell you this himself, bro. When he won the Brawl for All, and now we knew he was going to fight Butterbean. At that point, Mark Merrow's, Gold Gloves boxing manager, his name was Ray Rinaldi. He started training Bart. And he was training Bart to be a boxer. So when Bart went in that match against Butterbean, he was going off of the way Ray Rinaldi had trained him. And it wasn't the style he used when he was knocking everybody out cold. He literally was trying to box Butterbean. And Bart will tell you today, I saw him about a year ago, and he'll tell you today, man, if he would have went into that match Just like he went into his Brawl for All matches, things may have been a little different.
And you brought this up earlier, but maybe you want to clear up. A lot of people think that this was a big master plan of you to design Owen Hart coming down from the roof of the Kemper Arena. But I understand that it actually was more of a spur of the moment thing.
That's it, bro. That's so absolutely bullshit, man. And bro, I get tweets to these days. You killed Owen Hart. To this day, I get tweets about how I killed Owen Hart. How that happened, bro, is that show was written. It was done. I was in my office. It was probably Thursday night before the pay-per-view, and I'm just dotting the I's and crossing the T's, making sure we got everything. My phone rings, and it was our director of operations. The guy's name was Steve Taylor. Steve Taylor had been at the WWE forever. I think he works at MSG now, but he was there from the beginning with Vince. And Steve Taylor called me, and he goes to me, he goes, Vince, he goes, the guys who repel Sting are coming to the pay-per-view in Kansas City, and they want to know if there's anything they could do on the show to show us what they can do, because they want to work with us. So is there anything on the show that they could do? So at that point, I literally got the show in front of me. And I said, let me look. So I'm looking through the show. I see Owen is the Blue Blazer. So I said, well, Steve, this might be something. I said, Owen's the Blue Blazer. I said, if we repel Owen like they repel Sting, I said, it'll be good for Owen. I said, it'll give Owen a big star, type of feel. I said,
and he was going to win the belt in that match.
Yeah, I said that'll probably work. So, Steve said, great, no problem, So, bro, at that point, I don't know who related to Owen. I mean, I don't know how that happened, but this I do know. That day, at the coffee urn, I seen Owen in his jumpsuit, okay? He had already rehearsed it. So Owen was there getting coffee, and I went to Owen. I said, Owen, how'd everything go in rehearsal? How was everything? Owen said to me, Vince, everything was cool, no problem. He said, but I want to ask, can you make one change for me? I said, what is it, Owen? And he goes, the way you have it written right now, the Godfather goes out first, then I repel down. He said, Vince, it's going to take me a while to get my harness off. He goes, if I'm there trying to get my harness off, why isn't the Godfather pummeling me? He goes, can you just flip the entrances for me? And I said, oh, and that makes all the sense in the world. I said, no problem, we'll flip the entrances, okay? Bro, never at any time did he say, Vince, I'm uncomfortable with this. Vince, I'm afraid of heights. Vince, I didn't feel comfortable doing it. Nothing. Zero. That was not important to the script. That show was written without that repel. That repel was added by request. That was the only reason. If I would have thought for a second, or Owen would have indicated for a second, a fear of heights, a fear of doing it, I feel uncomfortable, whatever, it would have never happened. And then there are those, Jim Cornette, people like this like to say this. Well, you know how wrestlers are. If they don't like doing something, they won't tell you because they're afraid, it'll hurt their spot. Well, there's a little history there with Owen and myself as well. And that history was when Owen was with Jeff Jarrett and Deborah, okay? I wanted to write a story of Owen kind of falling in love with Deborah. And the reason I wanted to write it was because Owen was so freaking entertaining. I wanted to see what Owen would be like in love with this beautiful girl that was probably so out of his league. So we were bantering that around. Well, I don't know if I pitched it to Owen. I don't remember. But anyway, at some point Owen came back to me. And he goes, Vince, I got to tell you. He goes, I really feel uncomfortable with this. I can't remember. Martha. He goes, with Martha, I just feel uncomfortable doing this, blah, blah, blah. I don't know how my wife will take it. Right then and there, I said, Owen, no problem. It's not important. We'll do something else. So there was a history of Owen telling me, I'm not comfortable with that. and me changing it, and it was no big deal, that I, without a doubt, feel if there was an issue with that, he would have came to me and said there was an issue, because he did it before. It was no big deal. It wasn't important to the script. It had no bearing on the match whatsoever. If we would have never done it, nobody would have even noticed. So yeah, man, that's why, like, it, you know, for people to still say that stuff to me about Owen to this day, it's like, you know what, bro? That's the absolute scum of the earth. Because nobody loved that guy more than I did. No, I love that guy with all my heart and soul, and nobody was more torn apart or distraught than I was. So for people to turn around and say that and have no idea how that went down, you know, that they're just the scum of the earth.
And his wife also said he wanted to be a firefighter, so if you were afraid of heights, that might not be the best job.
Wow, see, I didn't even know that.
The XFL, that must have been happening when you were there. What were your thoughts on all that?
The XFL was happening like right before I left, and I remember. Listen, we were becoming so popular at the time, and I mean, I think Vince's head was kind of getting away from him, because prior to the US, what was it? The XFL,
yeah.
Right, bro. Every station was coming to us wanting to get in business with us. Everybody. And I remember somebody pitched Vince a show that they wanted to give Vince like a nightly show where Vince would give his world views. Like O'Reilly. Like
right.
An O'Reilly type of show. And I remember I was sitting there. It was me, Kevin Dunn, one of Kevin Dunn's associates, and Vince McMahon. And Vince is talking about this show that they want to do with him. And like Kevin is putting it over. The other guy was Chris Chambers, who I think is still there. They were putting it over. And I remember Vince looked at me and he goes, "Vince, what do you think?" And I remember I just looked at him. I said, "Vince, nobody gives a shit what you think about worldviews." I said, "Nobody's going to give a shit, Vince." And the look on his face, I thought he was going to kill me. Weeks later, I hear about this XFL. And I was just like, you know, bro, like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, stick to wrestling. Like, wrestling is what you do. Every time you try to go out of it, it doesn't work. And like, yeah, and then to make the comparison to the NFL, I'm, you know, bro, I think that would probably be something he regrets. I think he would probably say that, but who knows?
And we did an interview with Al Snow, and he put a lot of blame on the Kennel from Hell match on you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
What are your thoughts on Al Snow in general?
Now, well, first of all, bro, you got to understand the Kennel from Hell match. In hindsight, I think you can understand the idea. They were supposed to be attack dogs. So these dogs were supposed to be running around the ring, you know, grabbing at the chain link. Like they were supposed to be vicious dogs. That was the vision. Well, those aren't the dogs that showed up that day. The dogs that showed up that day were like household pets and mild-mannered, and you could walk up to them and pet them. As soon as I saw the dogs that day, I'm like, this is going to be completely horrible. So, yes, I mean, that was my concept. I take full responsibility for that, but we did not get, you know, the dogs that we needed. But I love Al Snow, bro. I mean, I think Al's one of those creative geniuses. The stuff that he did with Head, he's a great agent now with TNA. I work with him in that capacity. I'm a huge fan of Al's.
What was your greatest memory of your time as head writer for WWE?
Oh man, bro. Yeah, bro. You know what my greatest memory was, and I think any guy who is honest will tell you this. My greatest memory was during that time. Those guys on the roster probably made more money than they ever did throughout their entire careers. During that time when the ratings were so high that we had a freaking Super Bowl commercial. And everybody was making money. We were selling out every show, and the pay-per-view buys and the television ratings. And those guys during that time made a ton of money. And I bet you there are a lot of those guys that are still living off that money today. That is probably my proudest accomplishment, because that was the end goal. That was the end goal. to get these guys as over as we possibly can, get the show as over as we possibly can, and at the end of the day, all those guys and gals will compensate. I mean, look at the things they went on to do. Look at what Rock went on to do. Look at, Steve had, Nash Bridges. He still has a TV. Sean's got a TV on now. Sable, God knows how much she made from Playboy. I mean, just what the money it enabled those people to make. I'm proud of that.
And you bring up money. What type of money does a writer make in wrestling?
Not a lot, bro. Bro, the most money I made when I was at the WWE, I think when I left the WWE, I was making $350,000. Now, bro, you got to take into consideration $350,000. You're working 7 days a week. You're on the road every single day. There's no off season, bro. Also, it's not $350,000 when the taxes are taken out. So, like, you got to understand, as a writer, that money is not lasting me till 2016. Whereas there were some guys that made 7 figures off of WrestleMania, off of one show. So, bro, that's why, it's tough being a writer because you're not making wrestler money.
And what led to your jump to WCW?
It was real simple, bro. It was Vince was really starting to overwork us by adding SmackDown. I was really, really starting to get burnt out. I needed a little bit of a break. I went into his office and I literally broke down and cried. And he turned to me and he said to me, Vince, I don't know what the problem is. You make enough money now to hire a nanny to take care of your kids. And right then and there, as an old school, traditional, proud husband and father, you just told me that you don't give a shit about me and my family. In that one sentence, that's all I need to know. And when those words came out of his mouth, I was done and never going back to the WWE.
Who brought you into WCW exactly?
I reached out to J.J. Dillon, so it was J.J.
And he had previously worked for WWE, so you knew him from that.
Yeah.
Was Eric Bischoff gone by that time?
Yes. Yep.
I guess they had fired him due to loss of money or
whatever.
Okay. Do you know how many years Bischoff actually profited while he was in charge of WCW?
God, I don't know, bro. I really don't.
Because we always hear about what a genius he is, but there really wasn't that many years of profit with him.
There weren't.
What was the backstage environment like in WCW compared to WWE?
Bro, freaking horrible. When I left the WWE, it was all a family, man. Everybody was on the same page. There were smiles all around. I walked into a locker room from day one that was freaking divided. The big stars dressed here, the mid-carders dressed there, the main eventers did not want to pass the torch and get the mid-carders over. The mid-carders detested the main. It was horrible, bro. I knew it the first time I walked into the building and I looked at the situation. It was night and day.
Just to briefly go over the cliques, what were the main cliques that you would find backstage in WCW?
Well, you would have your Hogans with your Nashes and your Scott Halls, just like the NWO. You would have that clique. Then you would have that other clique that was like Guerrero, Malenko, who am I forgetting?
Benoit. Maybe.
Benoit, yeah, they were Conan. They were that clique that couldn't break through that glass ceiling. So you had them, and then you had like I said, the Hogans, the
Sting, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Sting was never a clique guy, bro. Sting was always, at WCW and at TNA. Sting was always to himself kind of a guy. He was never really associated with a clique.
And what was working with Roddy Piper like?
Bro, I thought it was great. I didn't work with him that much at WCW, so I didn't work that closely with him. But again, bro, there were certain guys that like when I worked with, there was that initial like being in awe of them. You know what I mean? Like the fan in you comes back.
Because in WWE, there really wasn't that many established stars.
Exactly. And when I went over there, it was the first. Well, I had worked with Piper at the WWE with that Goldust, that movie set gimmick.
Yeah.
So I knew Piper. But I mean, he was just one of the guys that I don't think I ever got over being the fan. You know, I mean, there were a couple of guys that fell into that category with me. You know, I'd say Piper, I'd say Flair was one of those guys where there was a little bit of an intimidation factor. But I mean, I know when I worked with him at WCW, I didn't think that was an issue.
What was the thinking behind David Arquette winning the title?
Yeah, which probably needed a publicity stunt. WWE was kicking our ass. We needed to do something that people would talk about to get some attention. So basically, it was just a publicity stunt.
And who would win in a fight between David Arquette and James Ellsworth, who has beat the WWE champion 3 times now?
Yeah, I know. And you know what, bro? I've not seen him wrestle. Like, I know his face. You know, I mean, I've seen him, but I've not seen him wrestle. I don't know, bro.
What are your thoughts on that?
Bro, it's hard for me to comment because I don't watch the show. Like, it's, you know, and I really haven't seen any. Like, bro, like, I'll watch Raw during the commercials of what I'm watching. Like, I haven't seen any SmackDown in a couple of months.
Was David Arquette pretty easy to work with?
Oh, God, yeah, bro. And that was the thing that people don't know, man. He was such a huge wrestling fan, and he had such a respect for what we did. Like, he was, you know, I mean, to me, to do what we did, for the publicity stunt we needed, I think he was the perfect guy.
And what are your thoughts on working with Ric Flair in those days? I know you guys have had your ups and downs.
Yeah, no, bro, again, Flair was the kind of guy just like Hogan where they thought that my objective was to come in and get the younger guys over and push them out. That's what they thought, bro. That's all wrestlers are paranoid. That's what they thought. And now there's a change in guard. That's what they think. And that's not what I wanted to do at all. I just wanted to get Hogan and Flair in the positions that they should have been in at that point in their careers. I didn't want them to be just wrestlers on the card. I wanted them to be more than that, and that's what I was working towards. But, you know, again, you know, this new guy coming in, he's trying to get these younger guys over. We're going to be out of a job, so of course you could see how their mind could run away with them.
And you did an angle with Flair, David Flair, and Stacy Keibler. What was it like working with Stacy Keibler, who went on to become a little bit famous for the men she dated?
Yeah, no, bro. She was, you know, she was another one that like just won a contest. You know, she just won a contest, and I mean, I saw her, and I'm like, you know, we got to do more with her. You know, I mean, she just looks so good, and I mean, I knew we could create a star with her, and that's why we did the Miss Hancock thing.
And what do you have to say to the critics about you winning the world title in WCW?
Oh, bro, they're such idiots, bro. Like, bro, here's the thing that fascinates me, like with dirt sheets. I swear to God, bro, I wish they can see how stupid they are and how stupid they look. I still skim the dirt sheets for headlines, you know, because I need to talk about certain things on my show. And quite frankly, bro, I really look for, you know, did anybody die? Is anybody sick? Like, that's really what I'm looking. I'm not interested in, you know, where, you know, how much Paige and Del Rio had to drink last night. I'm not interested in that. But the thing that amazes me is on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, on all the dirt sheets, wrestling is a shoot. It's a shoot, bro. We're going to, you know, this one's rumored to do this. This one's rumored. This one's got heat with this one. This got heat with this. They talk about the business of the business for 4 days. Then all of a sudden, when there's a pay-per-view on Sunday and Raw on Monday and SmackDown on Tuesday, all of a sudden, wrestling becomes fake. And they're talking about a fake freaking television show. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, you guys need to choose one. You're either going to be about the business of the business, or you're going to talk about a fake wrestling show. When I was Vicious Vincent's World of Wrestling, I talked about the fake wrestling show. I was a gimmick. I talked about the show. I was part of the show. It was the entertainment. When I do Vince Russo, the brand today, it's about the business of the business. These idiots try to do both. on one site 7 days a week, and it's freaking ridiculous. So the fact that they looked at a television show and a guy getting speared through a cage and winning a title that way and giving it up literally 3 days later because I have nothing more to prove. I've proven I could beat every wrestler in this company. Honestly, to be talking about that 15 years later, it's like, are you guys like really that stupid? Are you that imbecilic and that freaking mentally challenged that you don't understand this is a television show? It's the same thing. I'm reading this last week about people up in arms about the title going back and forth between Sasha, and it's a freaking television show. And when you're writing every single week, you know, so in the case of think about this. In the case of Raw and SmackDown, it's 104 shows, and it's 2 pay-per-views a month, so it's 24. It's almost 130 shows. You're writing 130 shows. You have to come up with all these different crazy scenarios to open up the envelope and give you things to write about. Otherwise, you're going to get Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn every single week, and nobody's going to watch. So Vince Russo winning the belt was just another part of a storyline to give us something else to talk about when you're writing TV for a year. It's that simple.
And the ratings around that time were higher than they are right now. Is that correct?
Oh yeah,
for
absolutely.
WCW.
Absolutely.
Not to mention the combined rating.
Absolutely.
Did you have much contact with Chris Benoit when you were in WCW?
Ah, man, none at all. And you know, I was there for 3 months, and then I went home. And by the time I came back, he was at WCW. So no, I mean WWE.
What was it like working with Bret Hart in WCW?
Bro, that was hard too, because you got to understand, when I was working at WWE, that's when Owen passed away, and now I had to go work with Bret. And the number one thing on my list was I had to sit down with Bret and have a conversation, because I wanted to be able to answer to Bret everything that happened that night. I was there, you know, Bret wasn't. So that was very, 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 that was probably the hardest conversation I ever had in the wrestling business. But I owed that to Bret. I respected Bret. When I went to WCW, I tried my hardest to put Bret back in the spotlight and back in the spot that he deserved to be. Because when he was under Bischoff's thumb, I mean, he was just another wrestler. I mean, they did nothing for him. And I was really, really trying to make him special again. I think we were getting there, but unfortunately he got hurt.
And what was the issue about, apparently you had plans of Tank Abbott winning the world title, and that's what led to you going out of power the first time? What was the big issue? That
didn't lead to me going out of power. That was in the works for a while. We were going into a pay-per-view, and we had key injuries, and Bret was one of them. But I don't know if Bret had the title at the time. I can't remember. Bret wasn't going to be at the pay-per-view. Jarrett wasn't going to be at the pay-per-view. I think Bret had the title at the time, or whatever. But whatever, we had to put the title on somebody. Okay? So, bro, you sit there and you tell me if this makes sense to you at all. Because, again, I was about reality TV. I'm still about reality TV. We were going to have some sort of a Royal Rumble. Okay, this is the way I laid it out. We were going to have some sort of a Royal Rumble. Sid was going to be number one. Okay? We're having the Royal Rumble. People are coming in. Sid's still hanging in, eliminating to Sid. Sid. Finally, he's lasting. He's there to the very end. Who's the last guy that comes into the ring? Tank Abbott. A shoot fighter as fresh as a daisy after Sid had been in the ring for 1 hour. Now, you're going to tell me that a fresh shoot fighter couldn't have eliminated Sid over the top rope, who'd been in that ring for a week? Because then the whole idea was, okay, now we have a UFC fighter who now has the WCW title. And keep in mind, this is me booking on the fly. This wasn't long-term booking. This is, we've got a problem here. We've got guys that aren't going to be with us. There's holes here. We need to come up with something different and creative. Now, the whole idea was, who knows how Tank would have done? And guess what, bro? If it would have been a fart in church, well, the belt would have come off of Tank Abbott in 2 weeks. But who would have known until we did that? But again, I was looking at that from an absolute shoot, under the circumstances, could this have happened? And the answer would have been yes. But you see, bro, again, in the wrestling bubble, people don't look at things the way I do. That's why when Vince Russo was writing, ratings were a certain way. When Vince Russo was not writing and the wrestling bubble is doing the writing, well, you got ratings that are completely different. People want to sit there and tell you I was a failure every place else I went, right? Well, when I went to WCW, under the original agreement, when it was Ed and I, the first show, the last show they did before Ed and I started writing, the rating was a 2.5, and anybody can go look that up. The 3 months when I went home, we were up to a 3.5. So in 3 months, we went from a 2.5 to a 3.5. Anybody can look at that. When I went back and I was forced to work with Eric Bischoff, I'm not taking responsibility for that time. Because that's, having to work with him, that was not going to work from the beginning. So I'm not taking any responsibility for that. I go to TNA.
Why didn't that work?
Because him and I are like oil and water. I respect people. I treat people with respect. I like getting my hands dirty. I like being one of the workers. I like getting in the trenches. I don't think I'm better than anybody else. Eric Bischoff, on the other hand, thinks he's better than everybody else, is driven by money and by power, and treats people like shit. And that's why we don't get along with two completely different people. I hated the way he treated people. And a lot of the way he treated people, they were my friends. And I hated it. And I never got along with him. I'll never get along with him with two different people. But then people, they'll sit here and they'll want to talk about, Vince was the filter. Vince was the filter. Vince McMahon was his filter at WWE. That's why he was so successful. I looked at TNA ratings the other day. 300,000 people are watching TNA. Do you know what we had TNA up to when I was writing at TNA?
No.
1.3 million people.
So a million more.
1.3 million people were watching TNA at one time when I was writing the television. There's 300,000 people watching it now, but yet people will tell you, oh, he was only successful at WWE because Vince McMahon was his filter. Again, all that stuff wanted to be ignored, and here's why. Because my wrestling philosophy is different. My wrestling philosophy is based on entertainment. My wrestling philosophy is, what are the masses going to watch? What is going to appeal to the regular TV viewer that's not a diehard wrestling fan? The diehard wrestling fans are already watching. They're going to watch. That's the 300,000 people watching TNA. But how do you get those casual television viewers that are watching Game of Thrones, that are watching The Walking Dead, that are watching all these other things? How do you get them?
Who were the main people working against you in WCW?
Oh, good. Flair, Hogan, Kevin Sullivan, J.J. Dillon. It was the old boys. It was the old boys club, and it was, again, this guy wanted to come in to do TV a different way. And you got to understand something. My form of TV takes a lot more work. You've got to do dozens of pre-tapes. Pre-tapes take a lot of times. Sometimes you got to come early to the building. Sometimes you leave late. People don't want to work like that. People want to come into work, clock in, have their match, and clock out. So when more work is required of them, they don't like that. That's why when you watch the WWE today, you don't see vignettes anymore. You see a handful per show. Nobody wants to do the work. I mean, we used to do 30 vignettes in one show, but that takes a lot of work, and a lot of people don't want to do that.
What was the whole situation with you and Hogan at the Bash at the Beach?
Oh, God, bro, that could be a whole other thing. The
brief version of it.
The brief version of it is Hogan was in on it, Bischoff was in on it, everything you saw was agreed upon. Hogan went home and read the internet of how everybody believed it and everybody bought into it, and Vince Russo finally put Hulk Hogan in his place. All that stuff pissed Hulk Hogan off. The next thing you know, I'm getting sued for defamation of character, and Hogan and Bischoff are claiming they knew nothing about the promo or anything I was going to do. Obviously, it went to a court of law. The court of law kicked it out because they said this was a wrestling show. He referred to you as a character. This is a waste of our time. Hogan took it to a second court where a different judge did the same exact thing. So the bottom line is we were all in on it. Hogan got his feelings hurt because people thought it was a shoot, and because of that he sued me in a frivolous lawsuit that was thrown out twice.
And what was it like working with him before that? Was it all right? Or?
It wasn't all right, bro, because he never trusted me. You know, he didn't trust me. Flair never trusted me. In their minds, I was trying to get rid of the old guys. I had a contract, and my incentive was based on ratings. I got paid based on ratings. Why, in my wildest imagination, would I want to eliminate a Hulk Hogan and a Ric Flair from the show? Well, I'd have to be an idiot to want to eliminate two of the biggest names in the history of the business from the show. My whole idea was to repackage them, put them in a role where they need to be at this point in their careers. But in their minds, I wanted to get rid of them. I wanted to put them out of work.
And what are your thoughts on Kevin Sullivan, who you worked with there, or I guess who replaced you there?
Yeah, I just had Kevin on my show. I love Kevin, man. I think Kevin's a genius. But, you know, bro, at that time, Kevin was one of the political players, and there's a lot of politics that come into play. And I get it, and I understand it because it's part of the business. But as a person and as a creative mind, I love Kevin Sullivan.
Were you still under contract when WCW went out of business?
Yes.
What were your thoughts on WCW going out of business?
I mean, bro, I didn't care. At that point, I just wanted my money. I mean, that's all I cared about, bro. I had a 2-year contract. I just wanted to make sure I got all my money, and that's all I cared about.
So after that, you went to TNA?
Right.
I've heard that your first little stint in TNA in 2002 to 2004 you described as a total nightmare. Why is that?
Oh, bro, that's because, you know, like, I was kind of in the middle of the Jeff Jarrett, Jerry Jarrett relationship, and I did not want to be involved in that. And I know, you know, Jerry Jarrett hates me, and that's got a lot to do with it because I worked very closely with Jeff, and I was very good friends with Jeff, and me and Jeff were probably more on the same page than Jeff and Jerry. So, you know, he despised me for that. It was just horrible for me being in that situation with a father and a son.
What's Jerry Jarrett like as a person? Because now we've had recently Bruce Pritchard doing a lot of impressions of him, so his name's been out there a bit.
Bro, Jerry Jarrett is very Jim Cornette-ish, where they worked in territories when certain things worked, okay? However, the things that worked in the 70s is not going to work today. And they still somehow, some way believe that those same exact things would work in wrestling today. So they won't get off it. They won't open up their minds to other ideas and a different way of looking things. They're very old school. They're very stuck in the past and what they did. And it makes it very difficult to work with people like that, especially in a creative environment when there can be no boundaries. Like, you've got to look at everything. You got to look at what worked in the 70s, what worked in the 90s, what's going to work now today in 2016. And when you're that closed-minded, it's almost impossible to work with.
Jerry Jarrett has said that he would have been the one to take over WWE for a while if Vince McMahon had gone to jail during the steroid trial era. Do you believe that there's any truth to that?
I don't know, bro. That's hard for me to say because I was there. I was there at the very... I was there when Jerry was there, but it was after Vince had been acquitted,
yeah.
But Jerry was still working there. So I was in there at the very, very tail end of it. So, like, I have no idea what the plans were.
Have Jeff and Jerry made up since they're falling out?
I think they have, bro. I think they have, but I'm not positive, but I think they have.
What's going on with Global Force Wrestling? Do you have any idea? Is that pretty much it?
I don't know, bro, because I don't talk to Jeff that much anymore because of things that happened, with TNA. But I don't know.
And you ended up coming back to TNA for probably its most successful time. What made you agree to come back after your first bad experience?
Yeah, really why I came back, bro, was because Jeff's wife was dying. And I loved Jill Jarrett. I personally knew her. I personally had a relationship with her. I wanted to help my friend because, he had 3 daughters. His wife was dying, and I knew he needed help, and that's really why I went back.
Who was writing with you at that time?
Me, Jeff, and Dutch.
Okay. What's your opinion of Dutch as a writer?
I think Dutch is a genius, too. Dutch is very much set in his old ways as well, but Dutch will also look to today and try different things, and he's such an intelligent person. It's unbelievable.
And you managed AJ Styles for a while. What were your thoughts on that, and how do you feel about his success lately?
Yeah, no, bro, AJ's a great human being, man, and I think he deserves everything that he's gotten. He's a great man. He's a great husband. He's a great father. I knew it back then. I know AJ's not going to change his colors, so I'm very, very happy for him.
Were you part of bringing Kurt Angle into TNA? Was that?
No, I wasn't part of it. Jeff had worked on that, but I was there when he first came.
You supported that?
Yeah.
What do you think the biggest reason was for your success at that time during, I guess, the best part of TNA's years?
Well, bro, the only place to go was up. It was a startup company. So as long as we continued writing good television, we would continue to build an audience. And as I said, bro, we had that rating up over at 2, and I think we had that audience at 1.3 million.
What were your thoughts on when they brought Hulk Hogan in and Bruce Pritchard and not all of Hogan's friends, but a good amount of his friends?
Yeah, bro, a lot of that was Dixie Carter never wanted to make decisions. And she always wanted people to make decisions for her. So, it was, first it was Jerry, then it was Jeff. Then I literally got to write the show by myself for maybe 2 weeks with no outside interference. Then Bischoff, then Hogan, then Bruce Pritchard, then John Gaborik. That was her problem. She never wanted to make decisions. She would always bring in these people to make the decisions for her. But what she didn't understand is every time she brought somebody in, they wanted to go in a different direction. So, every 2 years or whatever it was, you're completely changing direction and going another way. And, I think, we were heading in a certain direction with TNA before Hogan and Bischoff came in. As soon as they came in and as soon as they got Dixie's ear, it was off in another direction.
And you left around that time?
I left when Pritchard came in, bro, because the creative was so level on top of level on it. There was so many freaking people involved in it, so many opinions involved in it, that it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous, it was stupid, it was counterproductive, and I said to myself, somebody's got to bow out of this, and it might as well be me.
What do you think TNA's biggest mistake has been in their history?
Dixie's not cut out to run a company. She's especially a wrestling company, bro. And like I said, her fear of making a mistake or her fear of being wrong leads to her not wanting to make any decisions. You can't run a company like that not making decisions or being afraid to make the wrong decision. And I said it all along, as long as Dixie Carter was running that company, it was never, ever going to reach its potential.
I know you're friends with Billy Corgan, but do you actually think he could have done anything to save the company?
Bro, if they would have let him do his thing, I think he definitely could have helped. If he wouldn't have had handcuffs, if John Gaborik didn't tweak his stuff, if they would have let Billy kind of run with his vision, I would have liked to seen that.
And you returned to WWE at some point before, in between, I guess, your TNA runs. What was that like? And I guess you were working under Stephanie at that point.
Yeah, bro, I was only there for a couple of weeks, and it was evident to me that, Stephanie did not want me there. Listen, man, Stephanie, with all due respect, when I was writing creatively, Stephanie would sit in on the meetings. I see the creative today, and quite frankly, like, Stephanie McMahon can't freaking shine my shoes when it comes to creative. So how could she allow a Vince Russo to come back to the WWE and work under her when I'm just so much better at it than she'll ever be? So she never wanted me there from the get-go. Shane was the one who wanted me back. But when I knew I was going to have to work with Stephanie and she didn't want me there, I just knew it wasn't going to work.
So there is a difference of an opinion between Shane and Stephanie that you've noticed?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think Shane would do a better job?
I think so, absolutely. I think, too, with Stephanie, I see much more of an ego. I see Stephanie, like, getting off on the power and mistreating people. And Shane's not that way. Shane's all about being one of the guys. I think Shane is more business oriented. Shane doesn't have as much of an ego. That's why I think it would be more successful under him. Since
they've made Kevin Owens champion, they've drawn some of the lowest ratings in the company's history. Why do you think that they want to push this very average-looking person as a real person, not as a wrestler? He looks like your average person off the street. Why do you think they insist on pushing this?
Well, bro, from what I've heard as a shoot, like Kevin Owens is really Triple H's boy. And I mean, bro, it's so funny. If you, like, bro, the old Sesame Street where they used to put like a picture of a chicken and a hen and a goose and a hammer, and they would say what here doesn't belong, and the hammer doesn't belong. Bro, do you know the champions that WWE has had? When you look at the champions they had, go back to Bruno Sammartino. You go back to the Hulk Hogan's. You go back to, just the champions they've had throughout their history. And, I mean, bro, Roddy Piper wasn't even a WWE champion. And you look at the champions they had, the Savages, and, I think the Warrior was a champion. But then you look at Rock, and you look at Austin, and you look at Taker, and you look at Shawn Michaels, and you look at Bret Hart. You look at, like, this collage of champions. And then you put Kevin Owens' picture in that. Kevin Owens does not look like a champion. And you know what, bro? Maybe part of that is the WWE's fault. The WWE is responsible for ring entrance, ring attire, writing, developing a character, molding a character. They're responsible for that. So I don't put this all on Kevin Owens. They've got to make and create a star. But Vince McMahon was the one who told me, from Vince's lips to me, Vince, if you want to be a star, the first thing you have to do is look like a star. Vince McMahon told me that. Everybody I just mentioned look like a freaking star. Every one of them down the pike. Look, John Cena is a freaking star. Whatchamacallit? Lesnar is a star. These guys look like stars. Kevin Owens does not look like a star. And if he's there because he's Triple H's boy, well, that tells you a lot you need to know. And the fact that they are drawing less crowded house shows, that tells you something. Why they don't make a change, I don't know, bro. I don't know how things work there today. But when the WWE champion is the hood ornament of your company. If it were me, my hood ornament would not be somebody that looks like Kevin Owens. That's my opinion.
Because if you were an MMA fan and hadn't seen wrestling and you looked at it and you saw that he was the champion, yeah.
Your first reaction, you know what your first reaction would be, bro? I could take that guy. That's the thing about wrestling, bro. When you go back to before I got in the business, and even when I was in the business, when you saw a wrestler on TV, like, you knew that guy would freaking wreck me. You know, I was on the phone just the other day, bro, 2 days ago, whatever, with Ron Harris. Bro, do you remember what Ron and Don Harris looked like?
Oh, yeah.
Bro, and they were mid-carders at best, but that was wrestling. Bro, put Kevin Owens next to Ron and Don Harris. Like, are you serious, bro?
And we've done interviews with Carl Ouellet, and I've heard you put him over before. So I just wanted to ask you, who do you feel is better between Carl Ouellet and
Carl Ouellet, without a doubt, bro. Without a doubt. He was a great worker. Bro, everybody puts over Kevin Owens' work. I don't see it. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't see it. I've sat there now, and I've sat through enough of his matches. I see the somersault in the corner. I've seen him a million times. I watched Carl Ouellet work. I was there for dozens and dozens and dozens of his matches. No doubt in my mind he was a better worker than Kevin Owens. But again, that right there shows you the level of competition when he was there compared to the level of competition now. I mean, that is the barometer right there that shows you what wrestling used to be and what it is now.
And Carl was also a big guy, strong guy.
Oh God, bro, he would kill you. He literally, bro. He was one of the guys that, like, if you quiet, reserved, kept to himself, but, like, bro, you knew you would not want to screw with that guy.
And Jim Cornette really never shuts up about you. I don't think he does one podcast without bringing up your name at least a couple times. What do you think about this obsession he has with you?
Well, bro, I mean, obviously, I think I've made him a lot of money over the years because I think I've become part of his act. So, like, it's all shtick with him. He's got an audience now. He's got an audience, and that audience enjoys him ripping on Vince Russo. So, he gets money from that audience. He makes money off that audience. So he continues to rip on Vince Russo. It's just become part of his act, and it's become part of his shtick. Bro, it amazes me. Like, I've never heard one single Jim Cornette podcast. I've never heard one. But it's freaking obvious, bro, that the guy literally listens to my podcast, like, just to get material. And, like, I swear, like, it's just like, bro, like I said, I understand it's become part of his shtick. I understand he's got an audience that likes it, and I understand he makes money. But, I mean, bro, like, I had to stop talking about how bad the WWE is because it got old. Like, what else could I say about it? Like, guys, I think this product is horrible. I had to stop because I can't keep saying this every week. Just the fact that I don't know how he could just go on and on and on. I don't know how he could do it, bro.
And with the WWE ratings getting lower year by year, and that's not just me saying that, that's a fact from what we can see. They were celebrating recently Goldberg's rating spike when he returned on Raw, but it was still a lower rating than the same week the year before. Do you see any good future for wrestling in anytime soon, or do you think it's going to continue?
It's going to continue, bro. It's dead. Wrestling's dead, bro. I do my podcast on Podcast One 5 days a week. Bro, I had to make the conscious decision to stop talking about wrestling because I saw what was happening with wrestling. I saw what was happening with the wrestling business, and I said, I am not going to put my eggs in that basket. It's a sinking ship. You got a 72-year-old man running it. You got his egomaniac daughter and her husband waiting for him to drop dead. God knows what they would do. The people that are good, that can contribute, are being cock-blocked because people are protecting their spots. The last thing in the world a Triple H or a Stephanie McMahon would ever want, or Russo and Ferrara ever working for the WWE again. That's the last thing they would ever want. So they block out good people to protect their spots. Meanwhile, they can't get the job done. They've proven they can't get the job done. The wrestling business is killing the wrestling business. And unfortunately, I don't see that changing anytime soon.
And what about TNA's future? It seems like ever since their inception, they're almost always just about to go out of business. Do you think they're going to keep stringing along for a while, or is it only a matter of time?
Bro, the hardest thing with TNA is, bro, and I found this out at WCW, and I'll tell you why. When I was there for 3 months, and Ed and I, we took the rating from a 2.5 to a 3.5, okay? Within 3 months, when I went home, that rating went from a 3.5 back to a 2.5. Okay, and bro, the numbers are there for anybody to look up. When I went back and I realized we had them here and now we've gone back here, bro, I knew in my heart of hearts we lost them. I knew we had a chance to get them back. We were getting them back. In 3 months, they went back to the same old wrestling shit. And I knew we're not going to get them back. I think it's the same thing with TNA, bro. They had 1.3 million people watching the product. They had them. They had them, bro. They've got 300,000 now. They lost 1 million people. Bro, once you've lost somebody, it is very, very hard to get them back. So I don't know. I don't know how they're going to get them back.
Would you say that you're probably the first actual writer ever hired by WWE that was not like a past wrestler?
Oh, absolutely, bro. And that's why the Attitude Era was the most successful era in the history of wrestling, because it was written by writers. And here's the most important thing, bro. We wrote it like it was a television show. Ed Ferrara and myself wrote that like, we've got a block on Monday nights from 9 to 11 o'clock at night. What are the other shows that we're competing with? And we treated it and wrote it like a television show. Before Russo Ferrara, it was wrestling. After Russo and Ferrara, it's wrestling. Wrestling is only going to draw you so much, bro. You've got to appeal to the masses. And if you don't, you're just going to have your niche audience.
And I didn't read into this too much, but recently there's been a lot of stuff online claiming that you're sexist. Do you want to just address what that situation is all about?
Yeah, I got to think of how that's. Oh yeah, no, bro. Yeah, I have my podcast, and I told you, like, I don't even talk about wrestling anymore. And the two things happened. First of all, bro, I was at an airport in Atlanta, okay, and I had to go through TSA. And all the personnel at TSA, they were all African American, okay? I had a problem at TSA, and I asked to speak to the person's supervisor. Okay, the person that I had a problem with was a female African American. I asked to speak to her supervisor, okay? Everybody in the department were African American, okay? They had me sit and wait to speak to her supervisor, okay, bro? I sat there for over an hour waiting to speak to her supervisor. In my opinion, everybody there protected her and kept me from speaking to her supervisor. Finally, after sitting there for an hour, a black officer comes up to me and says, listen, you're going to have to leave now. And I said, leave what? I said, I'm not doing anything. I'm here cool as a cucumber. You've had me waiting here for a year to, for an hour to talk to her supervisor. So next thing I know, the black cop says to me, I want you to know there are cameras all over the place watching you. And I'm like, watching me do what, bro? Like, I'm literally sitting here waiting to talk to her supervisor. So now I'm feeling like I'm being racially profiled. That's what they were all African Americans. I just wanted to speak to this woman supervisor. They were not allowing me to speak to her supervisor. Finally, the guy literally escorted me away. I was never allowed. And bro, this supervisor was dropping F-bombs on me. I mean, like, I was appalled that this supervisor was representing the government and TNA in a job like that. So I felt it was my duty to tell our supervisor, if she talks to the wrong person that way, you can have problems. They never let me speak to a supervisor. So I went on my show and I laid out that story just like I told you. And I said, I felt like I was being racially profiled. I'll be honest with you. I said, as a white guy, I felt I was being racially profiled. Well, bro, there's a guy online that literally he's very Jim Cornette-ish. This guy has been stalking me for months and literally has a Twitter account to just smear my name and bury me. Bro, this guy went to wrestlers that I know and tweeted them and said, do you know Vince Russo said this and this about you? Vince Russo said this. Bro, I never said any of it, and the wrestlers he went to believed him. So now I had to go back to them recently, and I had to say, guys, do you know, like, this is somebody that's been stalking me. I never said that. He's literally making all this shit up for whatever reason. I don't know who this guy is, right? So, bro, this guy takes my hour-long podcast, okay, cuts it and edits it down to a couple of minutes to paint a picture of me as an absolute racist. He took an hour, cut it down to about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay? So, bro, of course, then people want to know why I have problems with the dirt sheets. Okay? One of the people who runs a dirt sheet out there, Ryan Satin, the Pro Wrestling Dirt Sheet. I think that's the name. I don't even know what the dirt sheet is. Ryan Satin listens to this 7-piece, not 7-piece, 2 or 3 minute edited version of what this guy who is stalking, bro, the guy calls himself the instigator.
Right.
He listens to this 3-minute version and then goes on his site and his sheet and this, that, and other thing and makes claims that I'm a racist. Right. Didn't even listen to the entire podcast. Literally bought into what a troll. The guy succeeded. He got Ryan Satin to bite with a little bro, you could tell clearly. The guy, there's like 12 edits in it.
Right.
And he took that and ran with, Vince Russo's a racist. So that's why I have issues with dirt sheets and people that think they're journalists, have no background in journalism whatsoever, and they're literally people that wanted to get into the wrestling business but could not. So now all of a sudden they think they've made themselves, they've given themselves a position and a job in the wrestling business when they're not in the wrestling business at all. They've never been in the wrestling business. They're just reporting. And everything, bro, is sensational headline to get people to click. Vince Russo's a racist. Let's click on that. And that's where that story came from.
And it's similar with the sexist story, I guess.
Yeah, same thing, bro. I did a show. The election was just happening. And I did a show and I said why I didn't vote for Trump and why I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. And the reason I said I I did not vote for Hillary Clinton. As I am a Christian, okay? I've read the Bible. I've studied the Bible. When I read chapter 1 Genesis, okay, with the courses I've taken, I believe that God created roles for men and women. I believe that. By reading the Bible, I believe the Bible is the Word of God. I believe men and women have roles. I believe He created them for roles. I said I don't believe the woman was created to be a leader. I don't believe that based on my religious beliefs. I don't believe that. But then what I said was, but this is what I do believe. I said, I believe the women's responsibility is to nurture, raise, mold, love, literally through their loving and motherly and nurturing through the gifts that God gave them. They are creating the next generation. And what I said was, as a man, I can go out and get any job to raise my family. If I wasn't working at WWE, I could have got a job at the post office. I could have got a job anywhere to bring home the bacon and raise my family. Could and support my family. Could I have nurtured children and created the next generation and molded these individuals like my wife did? I said, absolutely not. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, the woman's job is more important than that of the man. I said, I honestly believe that. I believe the man is the leader of the family. The man is the leader of the household. The man has to go out and earn the living and bring home the bacon. I believe that. I believe the woman's responsibility is to raise the next generation that are going to be making decisions into this world. And I said, that is far more important than what a man's role is. It's all in the show. You could hear it. And what did the dirt sheets take and run with that? Vince Russo says the women weren't made to be leaders. That's what I mean, bro. That's why I have such a hatred for those dirt sheets and the sites, because it is the sensational headline that they're going to get people to click on. It's half truths, it's gossip, it's hearsay, and at the end of the day, they don't give a shit. That's why they're not journalists, bro. They have no values. They have no morals. They'll say anything about anybody. I mean, like I said, bro, like Del Rio and Paige. For crying out loud, bro, you got two people that look like they're in love. Leave them the F alone, bro. Like, how or what they do affect me? What Paige and Del Rio does has no effect on me whatsoever. The fact that two people found each other and seem like they're very in love, I think that's a great thing. I don't think there's a story there. But like I said, especially with business being down, they've got to create stories. And that's what they do. They create stories.
Where can we follow you, and what are some of your current projects that you're working on now?
Well, I'm working on a couple things. I mean, I'm on Podcast One. I do a show called The Brand Monday through Friday. Every day of the week, it's a different show, and it's not wrestling bell to bell. If something important happens in wrestling, I'll talk about it, but it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more entertainment, pop culture, music. I'll still do a lot of interviews and stuff like that. You could also see that show. I do the video of that show. You could see that on the Realm Network. Also here in Colorado, I'm working with a local promotion called Rocky Mountain Pro, and we put those shows up online on the Realm Network. We just did a 13-episode season, so you can see like the entire season from bell to bell. Usually I'm on Twitter most of the time at the Vince Russo. That's where I spend most of my time. Is
there any message you want to give to your fans that are going to be watching this?
Yeah, I mean, I want to give a message to everybody out there, because people freaking lose sight of who I am and what my intention was and what my goal was. And it's real simple. And people lose sight of this all the time. I grew up a wrestling fan. Okay, I grew up on Bruno Sammartino going forward. Okay, I thoroughly enjoyed the entertainment aspect of wrestling. There was nothing like it. You know, the guys I saw on my TV were larger than life. You know, going back to, George the Animal Steele and the Valiant Brothers and Lou Albano.
I forgot to ask you about Billy Graham, too. We've done interviews with him. What did you think of? Can you throw his name in there?
Oh, absolutely, bro. Billy Graham, Kevin Owens. I mean, come on. Like, seriously, you know? But I grew up on the entertainment aspect, okay? I worked my way into the wrestling business. I worked my way up the ladder by delivering. When all of a sudden I become the head writer of Raw, the #1 wrestling show in the United States of America, I have one goal and one goal only. I want as many people as possible to watch this show. I want as many people as possible to love the genre of wrestling like I did as a kid growing up. And I want the next generation to enjoy it, and the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation. So my goal was to bring this to the world, and for as many people as possible to enjoy professional wrestling. That was my goal. That was it. And at the end of the day, that's what I achieved. And nobody's come close to those ratings, and I don't believe anybody ever will. Because now, like I said, I was already in the WWE when I went up the ladder. Now, people like me, like, I'm shut out now. I'm blacklisted now. I'm cock blocked now. There's no chance of me ever going back now. So you've got wrestling people writing wrestling. But the fact of the matter was, that was my goal, for as many people as possible to enjoy the genre of wrestling and see what I saw and love what I love. And that's why it saddens me today and it sickens me today to know how many people were watching during that time compared to how many people are watching now. Compared to the wrestling business running me off, where I don't even want to watch it anymore. I'm not interested in it. I don't even want to talk about it. So at the end of the day, I achieved exactly what I wanted to achieve. And here's the problem in a nutshell. Those that don't like me, and we'll use Jim Cornette as the perfect example, and we'll use all those internet fans and as an example. Those that don't like me, they don't like me because of the difference in wrestling philosophies. I don't represent the wrestling they want. Here's what they don't understand. It's not about what I like. It's not about what you like. It's about what the masses like. A lot of the wrestling I wrote, I wasn't a fan of certain things. But going by the numbers week by week by week, I knew what people were tuning into and I knew what they were tuning out of. So we gave them more of what they were tuning into and less of what they were tuning out of. All of a sudden, 10 million people are watching wrestling on a Monday. That's what we did. So it's not a matter of your opinion or my opinion. It's a matter of what does the mass audience out there want to see. And when I'm the head writer of the WWE, that is my job responsibility. My responsibility is give the people what they want. That's what I got paid for. Now there are different agendas. Maybe Kevin Owens is the guy because he is Hunter's guy. Or maybe Hunter thinks Kevin Owens is a great worker. Well, what are the numbers telling you, Hunter? You get numbers every week. What are they telling you? Do the masses want to see Kevin Owens? Do the masses want to see Sami Zayn? What are the numbers telling you? But they're not looking at that anymore. They're looking at what they want. You look at that NXT crowd. The NXT crowd, it's what pops them. It's what they want. Meanwhile, We fed to the NXT crowd. We've given the NXT crowd what they wanted. Now to the point of we have a cruiserweight division. What happened to everybody else? Everybody else has bailed ship on wrestling. Everybody else is sitting there saying, we don't want guys that weigh 205 pounds and do acrobatics. If that's what we want, we'll go to Circus Soleil. That's not wrestling to us. So they've turned off those people. And that's what they continue to do. And the fact that they don't reach outside and bring new eyeballs to this, and bring television people to this, and bring people that know what the environment is in 2016, the fact that they're not doing that, they just keep digging themselves deeper and deeper and deeper. And wrestling is always going to be there. But, you know, the fact that UFC has so far past professional wrestling, that has as much to do with the success of UFC as it does the failure of professional wrestling. We allowed that to happen by not adapting and not doing what we need to do.
You can't stick up for professional wrestling anymore.
You can't. You really can't, bro. You can't.
Well, thank you very much for doing the interview, and we wish you the best with your podcast.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.